Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, it is Short Story Tuesday, a wonderful day to talk about the short form literature that exists in the world, and I found a good short story to talk about. One with, a wife who suspects that something is wrong, or maybe doesn't suspect but finds out that something is wrong with her husband. I am referring to The Wife's Story by Ursula K. Le Guin. For those who don't know, and once again, I've talked about Ursula Le Guin twice on this channel, so I figure, a lot of people might know who she is. But for those who don't know, Ursula K. Le Guin is a science fiction fantasy writer. Mostly, she wrote the Wizard of Earthsea novels as well as a bunch of other sci-fi fantasy type stories, and she's an acclaimed author for that reason. And she's also written a number of short stories, including this one, but also The Ones Who Walk Away from Amelis, which is a pretty good short story and one that I recommend that you seek out. It hits like no other short story really hits. It has a Shirley Jackson, The Lottery kind of feel to it, which is another short story that I should read for this channel, but I haven't done so already. But I will in the future, so be on the lookout for that. But yeah, so Le Guin is a pretty amazing author, writing like very few other authors I've encountered before. Very, very engrossing. And so without further ado, let's talk about The Wife's Story. I will do a summary of this super short story, do a little of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Wife's Story focuses on an unnamed narrator, the wife of the family, recalling a horrible family event that she didn't see coming, and in retrospect, she thinks like it couldn't be because whatever unspecified event is going to unfold throughout the story, it wasn't like her husband to do something like this. So as the wife recalls her past with her husband, she notes that there have been a lot of happy times, and although her husband has done a number of strange things, she doesn't really think about it too much, because again, like her husband she's very happy with her husband and things are great, so why would she ever suspect that something is brooding underneath the surface? The husband begins to grow more distant, and the wife is just curious about why that is, but she never really finds out or doesn't care to try to find out. And the children begin to grow afraid of the husband, with one child even crying when they see the husband, and the wife being like, knock that off. But when she looks at her husband, she sees something different in his eyes, and so she begins to be a little bit of afraid herself, and doesn't know what to do with that information. One night, deep into the night, the wife looks at her husband through a passage, and she witnesses her husband transform into a man thing. And I know what you're thinking. That sounds unusual. What are you talking about? And at this point, it is revealed that the wife is actually a wolf, and her husband is a werewolf. But instead of transforming into a wolf, he's transforming back into a human being. This sets the children off crying, to which the mother, who is a wolf, the wife is a wolf, sets about, attacking the husband with her sister, who shows up. And so the entire wolf pack attacks the man and kills him, but he doesn't transform back, and that makes the wife a little bit sad. And at the end of the story, the entire wolf pack flees into the woods, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, let me first start off by saying, what a twist, right? Like, you don't suspect it coming at all. And I feel like it's not much of a twist. This is a 3-page short story. probably a little bit longer if you space out the words or something like that. But I don't feel like this is a big spoiler because it's a short story. It's still worth reading, even if you know the spoiler, because there's kind of nothing else like this story. But in essence, this is a reverse werewolf story. Rather than a human being turning into a werewolf in front of a bunch of humans, and the humans trying to kill it, rather the werewolf at the end of its lunar cycle transforms back into a human, and the wolves are left to wonder, what's this? What happened to the sort of husband wolf? Where did he go? Let's get this human because it's a hateful thing. So it's a very interesting reverse werewolf story. And I would say the twist works because you make assumptions. And Le Guin is very good at revealing just enough that you make assumptions about what comes next, but she in no way specifies in the text that these people are human beings, that they're living in a house or anything like that. Because at the very beginning of the story, the wife recalls that the sister moved out. And also her parents had moved out a couple months previously, which is very unusual, but you don't think too much about it. You're like, oh, this must be like olden times or something like that. And so the husband moves in. But in no part of this does Le Guin say they move into a house. They're moving into a den, something like that. The previous adult wolves moved out a long time ago, and so you make assumptions, and that's how Le Guin gets you, is by you're assuming these are human beings that we're talking about, and then a little bit later in the story, the wife is talking about the husband being gone hunting a lot, especially during the day. And you're like, oh, well, that's normal. Like, human beings go hunting during the day. But Le Guin gets you because you're probably thinking, it's like me, like you're probably thinking, oh, he's using a gun to go out hunting for food or sport or something like that. But what is actually happening is the man thing, the werewolf is turning back into a human and going back into their family, and the wife wolf, I don't know how to exactly phrase it, but the wife wolf is assuming that during the day the husband wolf is going out hunting for food using his teeth because she thinks he's still a wolf. So again, like Le Guin is forcing you to make a lot of assumptions. She's not exactly cheating in the text, I would say. It's just very clever in how she does this reveal. It is an excellent reveal on how she does it too, because a lot of it leaves you with questions initially before you quickly understand. Oh, I get what she did. I get what she did. Allow me to read you a quote from this. The hair had begun to come away all over his body. It was like his hair fried away in the sunlight and was gone. He was white all over then, like a worm's skin, and he turned his face. It was changing while I looked. It got flatter and flatter, the mouth flat and white, and the teeth grinning flat and dull, and the nose just a knob of flesh with nostril holes, and the ears gone, and the eyes gone blue with white rims around the blue, staring at me out of that flat, soft, white face. He stood up then on two legs. I saw him. I had to see him. My own dear love turned in the hateful one. I couldn't move, but as I crouched there in the passage, staring out into the day, I was trembling and shaking with a growl that burst out into a crazy, awful howling, a grief howl and a terror howl, and the others heard it even, sleeping, and woke up. And right there, it's a very interesting reveal, because as she's describing what the husband is turning into, you're left with a lot of questions. Like, isn't that just what a human being looks like? And why is the wife so afraid of that? I had to actually read it a couple of times, but then I got to a later paragraph where she's saying she can't move, and then she starts howling, and you're like, what? Well, how does that work? And then it quickly comes to you through Le Guin's wonderful prose, oh, she's a wolf now. or she's always been a wolf, and this is just a werewolf story, a reverse werewolf story. It's honestly very clever, and I think it's a delightful twist that Le Guin does here. But another interesting thing about this story is the idea of not wanting to see the horror that has developed, or even not wanting to see the bad things that a loved one might be doing. The wife excuses her husband's odd behavior, leaving during the day to go hunting, or showing up at unusual times, or something like that, or even the children being afraid of her husband. She feels that fear too, but she's like, "No, child, you shouldn't be feeling that. That's your father." But in hindsight, like it's incredibly apparent that like something was wrong. But in the present moment, we're like, oh, nothing can be wrong. We're happy. Things are going good. It's not worth getting upset about. This person could never do anything wrong. I think those are all interesting ideas about how we don't really suspect something is wrong until it's far too late. And so it's also interesting how like the wife can't view this new creature as her husband. She refers to it as a man thing, and uses like distancing kind of language to push off what this thing that used to be her husband is. She calls it a hateful one at one point, as I was saying earlier. And so, she's distinguishing between what was her husband and what is clearly no longer your husband. Again, something that if you're refusing to see the horror of a situation, or you don't want to admit that someone is starting to do pretty terrible things, becoming unrecognizable, you're going to use that distancing language. I think it's really good on Le Guin's part, and it makes the story a little bit sadder, because not only is the wife seeing this happen, but we're witnessing her sort of distancing herself from the situation, not really understanding what has become of it. And at the end of the story, the wolves all run away into the forest, and the wife wanted her husband to change back, but he's already changed back into the human form. So she's never really going to see her beloved wolf husband ever again. And they're all running away into the forest as if to deny that the situation ever really happened. Again, not wanting to recognize the horror of the situation. And so it's very sad and kind of weird. I think in someone else's hands this might come off as way too goofy, but I think Le Guin does a really good job of handling the sadness and the horror of the situation. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Wife's Story by Ursula K. Le Guin. A pretty solid short story that does things that I've never quite experienced before. I'm going to definitely say I recommend going and finding this one. Even though I probably spoiled the short story for you, it's still worth a read. You're still going to enjoy the twist and see how Le Guin sets it up, because that's a large part of why it works is Ursula Le Guin's setup. And so definitely worth checking out. It'll only take a couple minutes of your time because it's a very short story and worth reading. If you read this before or simply want to comment on my review, do so below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion about Le Guin's work. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this unusual story. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and wolfish travels. Farewell.